In our next example, we're given a function and its inverse, and we'll graph both of these graphs on the same xy coordinate system, and then I'll state the domain and the range of each function. So first, we have f of x is equal to x cubed minus 1. And when I graph this one, I'm going to graph it in blue. And in order to graph this, we know that it's a cubic function since it's x to the third power, and we'll pick a few points to graph. So let's let x equal -1, 0, 1, and 2. If we need a few more points, we can always add those. So when x is equal to -1, if we substitute in -1 for x, -1 cubed is -1 minus 1 gives us -2. If we let x equal 0, 0 cubed is still 0 minus 1 is -1. If x equals 1, 1 cubed is 1 minus 1 is 0. And if x is 2, 2 cubed is 8 minus 1 is 7. Let's go ahead and plot these points. We have -1, -2, 0, -1, 1, 0, and 2, 7. Now we have to remember what a cubic function looks like. It's going to be a smooth curve since it's a polynomial function, and it's going to look like this. So here's the graph of f of x. Now, we want to graph the inverse function as well. So let's go ahead for f inverse of x, and let's make a chart for our x values and for our inverse function values. And when we do that, we'll simply take the original x and y coordinate and we'll switch those. So instead of -1, -2, we'll have -2, -1. Instead of 0, -1, the inverse function will have -1, 0. Instead of 1, 0, we'll have 0, 1. And instead of 2, 7, we'll have the point 7, 2. Let's graph these points. We have -2, -1. Next we have -1, 0. We also have 0, 1. And then we have 7, 2. So we can see this is also going to be a smooth curve, and it's going to look like this. Now, this is the graph in red of f inverse of x. Let's talk about the domain and the range of each function. So the domain of our original function, notice we can let x equal any value we want. And certainly by looking at this graph in blue, we can have x values as small or as large as we want. So the domain can be any real number from negative to positive infinity. The range of our original function in blue can also be any real number for y, because we see the arrows going down and up means the y values can be as small or as large as we like. So the range is from negative to positive infinity. Now let's look at the domain of the inverse function. That's the graph in red. We can either look at the graph and we can see that the domain or the x values go from negative to positive infinity, or remember, the domain of the inverse function is always exactly the same as the range of the original function. So our domain is from negative to positive infinity. Now let's talk about the range of this inverse function. The range of the inverse function, again, we can look at the graph and we can see that it goes from negative to positive infinity for y values, or we can use the fact that the range of the inverse function is always exactly the same as the domain of the original function. In this case, it's from negative to positive infinity.